I come to the center with a PhD in art history from the University of Southern California in Los Angeles, where I focused on the afterlife of pre-Columbian art in modern and contemporary art. Then I did a 3-year postdoc across the street at the Yale University Art Gallery in the Education Department. And there I focused on academic outreach and academic affairs. And it was a great experience, incredible training. And I'm just so grateful that this position opened up at the Yale Center for British Art in exactly the kind of work that I love doing. So that's sort of the broad strokes of my career so far. My position has sort of been recently reconfigured to focus on teaching in the museum and specifically increasing faculty teaching with the collections. So basically when I arrived, coming in with this training from the art gallery, one thing that was really important for me to do was to understand what had already been done at the center and what sort of the gaps were. Because there's been amazing teaching already that the collections curator has undertaken and that education curators have done. But in order to sort of map out what my role would be at the center, I did an entry plan process to ask a series of questions to key stakeholders and look for trends and let that sort of crowdsourcing inform my position and what I wanted to embark on here. And that ended up sort of resulting in the very basic structure of a strategic plan that looks at creating a very welcoming space in the center for all teaching faculty, fellows, graduate students, and undergrads, and also increasing inquiry-based teaching with objects at Yale. So that's sort of how I've fleshed out my, my job description by sort of speaking with others. Strategies and techniques that I use to engage with university teaching specifically really draws from, again, the training that I received at the Yale University Art Gallery specifically with John Walsh, who is like the guru of inquiry-based teaching. And it's a lot about asking questions of objects and creating conversations in groups. And that's something that I'm really committed to and kind of found a home in, is how do you create a trusting, sort of liberated zone for people to share what's on their minds and what's dear to them. And it can be sparked by what's on view in the galleries, but it also comes from a deep place of where people are coming from and their embodied experience. So when I think about inquiry-based, it's both to guide someone through an object, through the basic questions of what do you see, and ground you that in visual evidence, and what do you see that makes you say that, getting into the narrative with what's happening, sort of the basic museum education 101 questions, but then allowing and holding a space for people to come together and share their perspectives. And I think that's something that the museum can offer in the 21st century that not many other places can. My collaboration with the Psychiatry Department started when I arrived at Yale. Full disclosure, I am married to a psychiatrist who was doing his residency in psychiatry, so I have a very unique link to that department. And when I arrived, I sort of was standing on the shoulders of giants because not only did the Yale Art Gallery have a strong sort of developing relationship with the professional schools, but the Yale Center for British Art for the last 20 plus years had this ongoing partnership with the School of Medicine. So a lot had already been done. And Linda Friedlander in particular, the head of education, had a long-standing partnership with Dr. Erwin Braverman on enhancing observation. And that was very much about sort of gearing the medical student or the residents or the faculty's eye into understanding both the objective interpretation and the subjective interpretation of art. And while that program is extremely successful and has been sort of promulgated nationally, internationally, for psychiatrists, it's important to understand what you're seeing, but it's really important to understand on a deeper level, emotions and feelings and where people are coming from and what's shaping their mental health. So we started a partnership that began very small. It was just a 1-2 hour session with the second-year psychiatry residents on the theme of stigma and sympathy. And it was centered around art objects that simultaneously pulled you in and were seductive in a way, and you developed a sympathy for them, but there was something equally strange and sort of a stigma and pushed you away. And I think that this notion of the pull in and the pull out, pulling away, is something that psychiatrists have to deal with in relationship to their patients. So based off of that collaboration, which we did in the museum, and through looking and then also an hands-on art making process, we developed from that a psychiatry residence day, which was for all Connecticut-based psychiatry residents. And that was a full-day program. And around this time, the Psychiatry Department had been restructuring its curriculum towards a more social justice and health equity curriculum. And a key part of that is a program called Structural Competency. And the idea behind structural competency is that psychiatrists, when they encounter a patient who maybe isn't taking their meds, is late for appointments, isn't eating well, a lot of times the physician would displace the physician would put blame on the patient for that. They would say this patient is non-compliant, or this patient is not following through with what I'm suggesting or recommending. What structural competency does is says it's not the patient's fault. It's the structures that are shaping their lives. They're not coming to appointments because public transportation is late or expensive. They're not eating well because they live in a food desert, and it's impossible for them to get healthy fruits and vegetables with the money that they're given. So this program is especially important because in New Haven, it's a majority Black and brown community with many of the people below the poverty line. So residents who are coming in from all over the country and getting placed within New Haven don't understand the limitations and the challenges that their patients face. So as part of structural competency, the heart of it is really these neighborhood visits. So the psychiatry residents go into the neighborhoods led by community members, and they sort of they try to take the bus there, and then the bus is an hour late, and then they have to get back right away. Or they notice that the sidewalks are really uneven, so people in wheelchairs are not able to go on the sidewalks and have to go in the street, and they have that lived experience. But what they realized was that the community members and the psychiatry residents couldn't just be dropped into a New Haven community. They needed an opportunity to meet in advance and to start that relationship and have those conversations. So working with them, we've created a pre-visit for all the second-year psychiatry residents and community leaders to meet at the Yale Center for British Art and to have a facilitated conversation with one of our museum educators around works of art that would spark these conversations about racism, food insecurity, transportation, health inequity, all the things that they'll be talking about on their tour. But the portrait part actually dovetails with the with the social justice, health equity curriculum redevelopment, in that the diversity task force of the Psychiatry Department did a survey about just sort of getting information about what people were, what people were feeling, and people were concerned about pay inequity along gender lines, and they were concerned about, I think they were concerned about one other thing, but through that came also the portraits. People were really upset about these 6 portraits of white men who were former chairman of the department. And these portraits were oil portraits that were commissioned by the department to celebrate the accomplishments of these former chairmen. but they were placed in a conference room much smaller than this room actually. And they were placed in such a way that when you were sitting at the conference table, you felt these men kind of looking at you and staring in a way. And for some people, it was a celebration of the past. But for many people in this survey, they expressed that it was a very negative feeling. And so much so that when they came to interview in that space, they felt that Yale wasn't a place for them. So the department took this very seriously and formed a subcommittee of the diversity task force, which was called the Art Committee. And I was brought in on the Art Committee as sort of an external advisor to think about what role portraits had within that space and to work together with the department to come up with solutions for what to do about those portraits. And that is still an ongoing project over the last 2 years, what to do with these portraits. And I think the Yale Center for British Art is in the middle of really grappling with a big challenge of their own, of our own, which is, what does the Yale Center for British Art, what does the title mean? What does the name of the institution mean? And what does it mean for different people? And we're thinking about this because we're thinking about our website and who the website is for and the audience. And sometimes the title can be in itself confounding. It can be alienating because of the word Yale. So anyone who's not affiliated with the university feels immediately estranged. People wonder what center means. To us, center is that we're a research institute, we're a public art museum, and we're sort of an international nexus, I think, of the study of and appreciation of British art. But then what is British art, what's that last part of the title mean today? How is British art relevant in New Haven specifically? I know British art can be relevant internationally and it has that broad scope. And we have incredible partners in London, but what does that mean for New Haven? And what does it mean for Yale? So I think our biggest challenge right now is really having those difficult conversations around what does it mean to be a Yale Center for British Art at Yale and in New Haven? Who are our audiences? How can we are free and open to the public. We are accessible, but we're not often approachable. So how do we become more approachable? And I think that my role is really to be that welcomer, be a sort of humble servant of the institution and of my community, and be an interlocutor and connector that really brings people together. So I joined CAA as a very nervous first-year graduate student in LA, studying at USC. And I had this impression that CAA was only for, the top scholars in the field. And, I would look through the conference materials every year and see just, professors that I either have studied with or want to study or have read before. And CAA always seemed like this very unapproachable place. And I would try to submit a paper or a panel, and it was just the inevitable rejection. Like, I just got so used to that. So I think CAA for me as a graduate student felt like it was for the real big deals. And I think that shifted when I was a postdoc and my first paper was accepted, and I felt, oh, maybe CAA is for me. Maybe I can be part of this larger network. And I think it was when Hunter was first announced and gave maybe his first address to the CAA community at one of the conferences, when he said that CAA is not something out there, you are all CAA. And that had such an impact on me, and it made me want to be part of CAA more. And I even came up to him after at the sort of cocktail hour to just let him know what that meant to me and how much my perspective had shifted because of his statement and being included in the conference. So that's sort of all to say that my work right now in the committees, whether it's the annual conference committee or the museum committee, is to help show people that anyone can be part of CAA. You don't have to have, you don't have to be a huge name in your field. You can be an aspiring scholar. You can be an emerging professional. You can be sort of entering that mid-level career where I am now. And you can give whatever you have to offer, and CAA will accept it and be grateful.